one of the girls from the sister dorm just walks up and just starts to like yell at me. Like, how can you support Barack Obama? You're this abortion lover and like you can't be a real Christian and I would never be friends with someone like you.
Welcome to Grown Up Christian. I'm Casey.
And I'm Sam.
And today we're joined by Josh White. Thanks for being here, Josh.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I think that you guys do a really good job at this. So I'm stoked.
Thanks. I'm actually really glad you listened. I always send it to people when we're talking. I'm like, you can check it out if you want to see what we're doing before you sign on to even having a conversation with us, because this might be your worst nightmare after listening to a couple of them. So.
This is definitely awkward, prompting people to listen to it. Hey, I think you might could you just tell me what you think? Such a douche.
I know. And expecting anyone to give you a genuine response is always I'm not the one who would send it anything out to somebody for real criticism unless I was close to them, because you're just going to get someone being like, it's good. Yeah, I like it.
Oh yeah, no, always. That's
Sam's one of those participation trophy parents, anyways. So,
yeah. So Josh, for the listeners, we met in college. My sophomore year at Liberty University. You were in a neighboring dorm of mine, and throughout college, we kind of just had our lives were a little bit intertwined between mutual friends and certain groups that we participated in. Throughout my time at Liberty, we would just have the occasional run-ins and conversations or get-togethers based on which one of our mutual friends was putting together a get-together. So I think we just want to get started with kind of learn about you and your life and what brought you to Liberty. So if you want to just go ahead and anywhere with as much a little detail as you want, but where you grew up, what type of religious community you grew up in, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great. So I grew up in Hampton Roads area in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Most of my life, I moved to Virginia when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
With my mom. She was in the military. She was also very religious. I can't really remember. My first memories that I have are all church related. Yeah, my mom was a minister, and when we moved to Virginia, the church that we were going to, the pastor of that church became somewhat of a father. Actually, I still call him dad. Really prominent role in my life, mentorship role. And, so most of my life, I was just always in church, whether every single day of the week I was in church. Monday I was cleaning up the church. Tuesday there was Bible study. Wednesday there was praise team rehearsal. Thursday dance rehearsal. Friday night prayer. Saturday there was always something, always some revival. And as a kid, I really appreciated that, and I still do really appreciate a lot of what I learned in that season of my life. And I very charismatic environment, very intense environment. So I started thinking about some colleges that I was going to go to when I was 18 years old, and I grew up in a very inner city community, very poor, a lot of poverty and violence and crime and gangs. And so my thought was I wanted to go as far away as possible. I applied to Hawaii Pacific University. That was where I was planning on going. Never planning on coming back. My goal was really just to make it out alive, from my where I was going to high school, and just to never look back when I left.
Wow, so it was legit dangerous then, huh?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I could tell you some stories. I mean, kids would bury their guns in my like school like courtyard so they could
What?
get through the metal detectors, and then they'd come back out and get their guns. Like it was
Oh my God.
definitely like a place where I was like, if I can just make it out alive, like I will be able to start my life like that. That was my goal.
Wow. So what it like, and that, I'm assuming that's high school. I mean, maybe middle schoolers had guns too, but
Yeah, definitely high school.
That's, I don't know. Would you see like little dirt mounds all over the schoolyard?
So they're usually
Either we got moles or everybody's armed today.
they would actually bury their guns under like the bushes around the courtyard, and yeah, I mean,
So
like it was just a lot of violence and not really like a safe place, but it was like a bit of the norm. I mean, people were not getting shot like regularly. I honestly can't remember a single time that anyone got shot. It was just like that was the culture of like violence. People felt the need to like be protected and feel safe. And you know, there were a lot of gangs, and I mean, there was you know, fights every day. I just tried my best to avoid you know crossing the wrong person. But
what do you think it was that kept you kind of from feeling the need to, I don't know, move in that direction, or I don't know, whatever it is, do take those type of measures to feel safe? Or do you think that had anything to do with your involvement with church? Was it your mom or your person you referred to was kind of like a father figure? What do you think kind of helped you from going in that direction?
Absolutely. It was definitely my like faith, my like, you know, Christian community. You know, every single day since I was a little kid, my mom would make me leave. Before I left the house, she would ask me like, what does the Bible say? And I would have to say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You know, which was really freaking annoying, by the way. But it did really instill this like sense that like everything that I needed to be successful, to get where I wanted to go, to be happy in life, like was already like inside of me, and like everything I needed to, you know, get out of like the situation that I was in was like, you know, already inside of me. And so I never felt the need to rely on a lot of those extrinsic like forces. And, you know, you're in church every single day. Like I also just didn't have time. Like I did not have time to be with these people because if you were not a part of this, like, you know, like religious community that I was in, I was like literally, I would leave church at like 2 a.m. in the morning, like a lot of days. Like it was just absolutely consumed my life. So yeah.
Wow. Did you have like a good group of friends at school too, or did you just kind of feel like that was you were just out of place in that environment?
Well, I definitely felt out of place. I was very poor. Like me and my mom were homeless off and on most of my life, and you know, I wore the same clothes like all the time. So the way that I kind of coped with like, you know, a lot of my insecurities was just to, you know, I was like a very class clown, like oriented, like student. I would always like joke. I try to be friendly and like fun and nice to everyone. And so I didn't have any like deep connections or deep relationships, but I generally felt like I was liked by a lot of people. I played like varsity soccer, and, you know, I wrestled for a little bit, and I was just kind of like the happy, fun, go lucky guy. And if I could just get through a day without someone like joking the fact that I stapled a hole in like one of my jeans, you know, that was a good day.
I think, dude, it's funny you say that. I mean, I doubt it was probably just more of an ingrained personality trait at that point. But even the way you just described yourself is kind of how in ways that I think of you from college, being like, I mean, people who you were just like you seemed like you were always smiling. Like people were really generally like, I think, drawn to you and your personality. And I think that I don't know, maybe that's something that that became part of you, or I don't know if that felt like something that you felt like you were still coping with anything in college, but it never came off like that to me. That seems like something that became, or maybe always has been, just part of your personality, that it's bright and attractive to people.
Well, you know, I really appreciate that. And I think that's something that I tried to take away from a lot of those childhood experiences was, how good it feels to like add a sense of like value and worth to someone
Yeah.
else's life. And so it kind of transitioned from being, a manifestation of my like insecurity or a coping mechanism, and evolved more into just a genuine desire to like make other people feel like loved and important and valuable. And, that's the kind of person that when I like finally got to college, I determined I want to be that person. I want to be someone that adds, that kind of like love and joy to people's lives.
Yeah, that's cool. I know you mentioned kind of looking at Hawaii for college. You mentioned like one of the things that sticks out to me is you being part of like a charismatic religious community. I mean, some of the things that you said really don't strike me as the type of catalysts for going to Liberty University, like your mom being a minister and it being a charismatic place. Like, and so what I guess what drew you to Liberty, and then I definitely want to get into what your experience was like at a Southern Baptist college where people were not like that at all.
Yeah. I think, I, like a lot of the people that I met at Liberty University, decided to go there because we were hoodwinked. We were tricked. I went to a college for a weekend, and, there were jump houses, and there's candy everywhere, and there's free food at the Rot. And, everyone was so freaking nice. Like, holy cow, people were so friendly. Like, when CFA starts, that, like, friendly cult serum starts to just infect people, and they love so well. Holy cow. I was like, man, I would love going here. I'll make so many friends. This place seemed so much fun. Everyone was just so great. And it, I wasn't really looking to go to a Christian school, but that doesn't hurt. I'm a Christian, and like these Christians seem like fun people, and we can all have a great time together. So yeah, CFA is really like, it is a deceiving experience. And I bought in, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I thought, yes to Liberty.
That's because Kool-Aid was all you were allowed to drink at Liberty University.
Oh, exactly.
No, that and water, maybe. But dude, I think that's so. I attended a college for a weekend too, and that was when I was. It's possible that I didn't go there because of that, but I remember going for college for a weekend and being around like really cool people in the dorms and stuff. And once I was at college, I remember having some college for weekenders, and I don't know. I don't think I was particularly cool to them or the kind of person that would have made them want to go to Liberty afterwards. And one of them stole my fucking sweatshirt, and that made me really angry.
Terrible.
I think there was like some sort of weird like comfort to Liberty when you were that age. Like there was something about it that just felt familiar, Yeah. And I think that's why I ended up, because I had no ties to that place other than I had gone there on a class trip like several years before. But for some reason that just stuck out in my head as like, well, Liberty's a really fun place and a little more normal by my standards.
Yeah. I mean, for me going into it, I was like, this is everything that I'm looking for, theologically speaking. Because I got a Bible degree from there. I don't know if you knew that, Josh, but it's like that for me when I was leaving my non-denominational church, which was basically similar. Non-denominational churches, or at least maybe in this area, maybe everywhere else, they're basically Southern Baptist churches in disguise. Mm-hmm. And so there was a comfort for me going there. And I was like, the funny thing is about getting a Bible degree, you're like, at that age, I'm trying to choose a place that's going to like have quote unquote sound biblical doctrines and things like that. And all that you're really fishing for is I need someone to reinforce my beliefs that I already have, and anything that says something differently is not okay. And so then you just pick the college that's going to just tell you everything that you already want to hear, which I find what should be I guess that should be the opposite of what you're looking for when you want an education.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But what so you did the CFA thing, and that seemed like a neat place to go. There nothing about it like you didn't really have much of a familiarity with its theology or kind of what they were about at the
No,
time?
I had no idea. The first time that I'd ever looked at the Liberty Way was like orientation week. I had absolutely like no idea that these people were like theologically and philosophically so opposed to everything I was and everything that I was becoming. And so, yeah, I really went in blind.
That's so wild. But you stayed. You didn't.
I did. Well, this is how Liberty gets you. Your first year, you take a couple of biblical worldview classes, some theology classes, Bible classes, evangelism classes, creationism, all of these classes that like would never transfer to like an accredited, like an incredible institution. So then you're in between this place of like, am I going to spend 5 years in undergrad or am I going to like spend 4 years in undergrad? And
Yep.
so, yeah, I decided to stay, and I did find a community of friends that I felt like, these are people that I want to kind of do life with, despite the fact that, like, it's interesting. When I describe my experience at Liberty, I kind of feel like I was like one of the most loved people on campus, but I was definitely one of the most hated people on campus. And so it was just, I tried to go with the people who were for me and decided to stick it out.
Wait, so break that down a little bit more because that sounds interesting. When you say you felt like you were the most loved person, but you were definitely the most hated. Do you think your beliefs in your being like maybe vocal about them were rubbed people the wrong way? Is that what you're getting at?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I mean, so I was hardcore charismatic. And so, people would come into my room and they would look at like literature and they would think like, oh my gosh, this guy's an apostate. Like he's an real Christian. Like these aren't good beliefs. He believes in like all of these like spiritual like things and we don't. And, so like every day was an argument, not to mention when I started going to Liberty, there was this really cool guy who was kind of becoming like very well known in political and pop culture. You might recognize his name, Barack Obama. Okay. And I was a huge freaking fan. And I knew like at the time, like I was like, I am a Christian and I am here. And I realized that like voting for Democrats isn't a really Christian thing. But I do know I freaking love Barack Obama. And, so, there was one day that I was eating at our dining hall, famously The Rock. And, I was like eating like dinner or lunch with my sister dorm after like a campus church. And everyone's having a good time. Great day. I'm like hanging out with all these people who seem like they really like me. Great day. And out of nowhere, one of the girls from the sister dorm just walks up, gets a crate, like a milk crate, slams it on the floor and stands on it, and just starts to like yell at me, like in front of the entire rock. Like, how can you support Barack Obama? You're this like, abortion lover and like you can't be a real Christian and I would never be friends with someone like you. And I'm like, holy freaking cow. That was like one of the first experiences that I had kind of feeling like, I am an other here. Like I am someone that like really attracts a lot of disdain.
Wow. Dude, that is, well, yeah. It's funny, man. When it was people like you, like meeting you and some of the people that you had connected with that were kind of some of the first to introduce me to a different way of being Christian. This group of people, because it was a charismatic bent, and I didn't have a charismatic bone in my body at the time, and even knowing that I had like and it was actually just knowing you guys and seeing people just be great people and do things differently or have different reasonings for the way they would vote. Because I hadn't even been introduced. I remember as a kid asking my mom, like, if Christians could be Democrats because of the type of home I grew up in. It was very like, yeah. And she was fine about it. She was like, yeah, like we have some friends that are, and like, but we don't really get like, my mom has always been, I picked up on what I was picking up on through like maybe just like Fox News and church and stuff. Like my dad talked a little bit more about political stuff than my mom, but my mom always was like generous and kind about allowing for people to kind of believe different things, but I still knew where my place was, and that's why liberty felt comfortable to me. And then being introduced to something different, and not only introduced to it and then being okay with it, but finding myself being pulled in that direction was a very strange experience for me. And I think it's so. I like that I found that at Liberty, because I probably could have just gone, I always wonder how like things would have ended up for me if I went to like a different college and just kind of stuck with my traditional beliefs and wasn't exposed to different ways of being Christian. I just wouldn't be around Christianity much at all outside of the bubble that I had already been a part of. And it's weird to kind of owe Liberty for like that aspect of my trajectory, or that point in my trajectory, simply because I met people who were just like different and great, and honestly probably more representative and more, not even just representative, but more in love with the idea of like being like Jesus, or being kind and caring and creating a better world, and like all this stuff. I was like, wait, I've never really heard people talk like this before, and that was like really like I don't know where I would have been without that. So I think it's that group that you were part of, and some of the friends you had that I had met, and even you, it's just like that was a really like important thing for me in college, even though I bet and you and none of the people who I met at that point really understand like the influence that they had on me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were some of the other things that kind of made you feel like an outsider in that on campus?
Yeah. So, there were definitely there were these moments where I just realized, like, I don't want to be anything like these people. Like I know that we're Christian and this is why I'm here and this is what makes me relatable and this is what makes me fit in here. There are a lot of like identities that I have that like don't make me fit in here. Like the fact that I'm, a Black man, the fact that I'm very like politically progressive. But like being Christian is what really connects me to this community. And, there were these moments where I realized like, holy cow, like if this is what Christian means, like I don't even want to be that.
Yeah.
There was this, so my freshman year of school, of undergrad at Liberty, I was hearing about this like protest that was happening on campus. There was this LGBT affirming like Christian group called Soul Force that I guess comes to
my
Liberty.
God, I forgot about that. Yeah.
They had come to Liberty for a couple years in a row, and protested a lot of the school's like anti-LGBT policies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd grown up in a community that was very like anti-LGBT, very homophobic, very like that is sinful.
Yeah.
And my whole life, like that had felt very off to me. And in part because like, especially as a kid, I was like very curious about my sexuality and like uncertain about it. And so, it was always something that I felt like I wasn't completely on board with like gay people go to hell, because I felt like I'm a good person and I feel really connected to my faith and I don't think I'm going, so this can't be true. But I was, I was really curious to kind of like meet these people because I didn't know what I believed. I was just like kind of emerging into like my thoughts on what it meant to be like, a gay person and if that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to the protest, I like with some cookies and I'm like, I want to kind of like, be nice to these people, get to know them, hear their story and try to figure out like what my thoughts on this are. And I'd actually like a couple of friends from my dorm 10, decided to join me, not because I think they were like in the same thinking as me, but I feel like they were just really curious as to what I was like planning to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so was I, to be honest. So I get to the protest and it's happening like right outside of like where the football stadium is. They're trying to stay kind of off campus because like I guess the last time they'd all gotten arrested because they came on campus.
Oh yeah.
And like Jerry Falwell had put out a statement like if they come on campus, like they will be arrested. And
yeah, they like pulling that card from time to time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I get there and I am late. Like there are already a lot of other Liberty students and faculty who are just shouting down this group of what I think around 11 or 12 like young adults. I think these like protesters are all like probably between the ages of 18 and 24. I mean,
wow.
And some of these people are, a lot of them are just like gay, lesbian. Some of them are trans, which I was just so fascinated by because I'd never actually met or talked to a trans person. And,
Yeah.
I was just trying to talk to them, but I could not. I could not over all of the like just, homophobic slurs, which I will not say on this recordings. I don't know how y'all do, but I mean, some of the like most grotesque things that you can imagine. It was like Westboro like Baptist like style insults.
That's so wild.
Like, I know, I just could not imagine, and I don't think that I really associate liberty with that intense of like a type of intensity of homophobia, but like I don't think that liberty is a great place. And the kind of people that showed up were like the worst
right.
of like not a great place.
Yeah.
Who were like showing up to kind of like bash these kids. And so I had gotten the numbers of one of the guys and, we had decided to meet up at Starbucks the next day. And they were going to be heading out that day. And they're like, well, you can have breakfast with us and we can chat for, 30, 45 minutes before we head out. And I showed up. Yeah, I showed up with those same two friends from my dorm and we ended up chatting for 8 hours. I mean, we got to Starbucks open and we were there until almost it closed. And like, I got to hear literally every single one of these persons, like individual stories, why they believe what they believe, how they identify as Christian, why they think their like their lifestyles are okay. And I left that meeting with a lot more questions and like feeling a lot less a part of, the Liberty community. And I really and I'm still really good friends with a couple of those protesters. And I really still like credit them a lot for some of the growth that I've had in my life and for helping me and like wanting and having an interest in teaching me. And yeah.
Dude, that's an incredible story. That's really a beautiful story.
Yeah, I really and that's, I think, one of the things I really appreciated about going to Liberty, being at a place that's so terrible really gives a lot of opportunity for some really like profound moments.
I know. That. Dude, if you could put a reel together of all the people who were changed, who were like converted out of the Liberty type of way of living, or I should say thinking, is based just because they went there, it would probably make them so upset and disappointed. It'd be wonderful. So what were you studying when you were at Liberty?
So I double majored in like international business and economics. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to trick several employers into thinking that academic experience was worth much because it really wasn't.
Yeah, I know the feeling of, dude, your degree means a little bit more than mine. Trying to convince someone that they should hire you with a Liberty University Bible degree is a really painful experience.
But also maybe not. Like, I feel like Liberty is more capable of like instructing someone on their like religious views than they are on secular views. I mean, I remember going into one of my math classes and my professor like opens up the class, by saying like this country is going to hell in a handbasket because Obama had just gotten elected.
Oh my God.
And we spent like the first half of the class like praying against immorality, a math class. So it's just not a great degree. I don't think I learned a lot, to be honest. And, but
that, dude, it's funny because with my degree, I look back on it and I'm like, I mean, I took classes on, like, I took their theology classes. Obviously everyone did creationism. Like the fact that that's a collegiate level class, it's a requirement for graduation is ridiculous. But I just like, I look back on every single Bible class I had, and all the way down to like about the books of the Bible or how to even read the Bible. And I don't agree with a single thing I learned in any of them. How much of a waste. Isn't that crazy? Like that, even that you can really still, like, for me, I still like have an investment in the Bible to the point that I like to learn about it and reflect on it in ways that I think are, I don't know, different than how they were when I was at Liberty. But I'm like, the fact that I can still, there's that many ways to look at it, but I spent 20 grand a year or whatever it was to be told one way and have it be told as the only way to do this. And then you're like, oh, everything I learned was just an opinion. It's like,
Yeah, no, absolutely wild. And one opinions that a lot of times they don't even really like understand or agree. And yeah, it's yeah. So I'm happy that there's been some changes at the school, and hopefully they can kind of find some, better ways of instructing. I remember, I think it was like my first 2 years at Liberty, I was randomly selected to participate in this like this state, or not state, it was like an accreditation assessment or like audit, where they like picked out and hand selected students to take these exams to basically determine whether or not like we should be accredited. And like I remember like being told like, oh, this is normal, like, don't feel pressured, but also don't fuck up. And, so it's an interesting academic experience for sure.
did you feel like going from your community, like your high school community and your religious community and the type of upbringing you had, like religious upbringing you had, to go like, I mean, Southern, I want to jump in this a little bit more when we get in, like, when I want to move on to what you're doing now a little bit, but at Liberty as a Black man, did you, and Southern Baptist being such a white theology, is that something you were really familiar with before, or with Southern Baptist theology and I mean, its origins and its development, and even the way that they would look down on, I mean, really, it looks down on things like Black liberation theology and anything really related to the Black church as a whole. It feels like they would deem some version of heretical, which should show you that there's obviously a problem there. But I don't know if any of that really seeped into your time at Liberty, or how much that, I imagine it wasn't something that went completely unnoticed. But I don't know, whatever capacity you want to speak to that, I'd love to hear a little bit.
Yeah, I had no idea at all. I started to look, like, as I found things were very concerning, especially with like the differences in theology, and like not even really like just the differences, because there were so many like cultural and like theological and political and cultural differences.
Yeah.
Like I was in like almost every regard an other at Liberty. Mm-hmm. That didn't really bother me or even concern me. What I found like so concerning was just the hostility that like was so pervasive. Like if you did not agree, if you didn't jump on like the groupthink bandwagon, you were kind of really an enemy of the people. Like and I found that very concerning, and I started to look into some of the origins of Liberty. Jerry Falwell, of how Southern Baptists were formed.
Right.
And I was very freaking concerned. And like, again, I'm not super concerned and wasn't that concerned with how things were started. Like, yes, Jerry Falwell had some really terrible beliefs most of his life. They were worse the earlier. The farther you go back, the worse they are. The same with the like Southern Baptist Church. But I also feel that, I don't have the privilege of disassociating myself from like things that had crappy origins. This country has crappy origins. Like every like institutional structure in this country has some terrible like beginnings. But it's the fact that they were still perpetuating a lot. Like it didn't seem like they really emerged too far from like those origins that I found like really bothersome. I did find that like, a lot of the there was a lot of like racism that was very overt that I just found really like shocking.
You
Um,
found that at Liberty that there was a lot of overt racism, is what you're
oh
saying?
yeah, absolutely,
And yeah,
absolutely.
I would
Um,
have been so blind to that. Like, dude, I don't know. We don't need
I,
to. I don't want to make. Go ahead, Casey. I want you
I
to take
think
time.
that I feel like I was, and most of us were totally blind to that. Um, I don't know. I don't know how much you want to get into some of that, but do you have some like specific examples of times where you really felt uh, that hostility in a racial sense?
yeah, I did feel that one, especially having a lot of the like political like views that I had,
Mhm.
that they were like very like the objections to my views were very, race based. And you heard a lot of the, black people vote this way because of this. Like they
Yeah, yeah,
need these handouts. They don't work hard. I had a lot of the like weird conversations with friends who would like take me back home to their parents and, oh, come back to our cabin or come back to my family's having this thing. I want you to meet my parents. And not realizing that like for them, this was this really fun, like cultural exploration, almost this intellectual exercise to like do life with a black person. And then you get to their home and it's like, oh, by the way, my grandma's really racist. Or like, you
yeah.
know,
Get out, dude.
no, I'm so serious. Or, you get to someone's house and it's like, dang, like I didn't even know that like there were this many like Confederate flags, like
Oh,
and it was just like I never had an issue with Confederate flags until I got to Liberty because it was just like, dang, like the way that people worship this symbol is so weird to me. Um, I remember waking up one night in my room. This was my freshman year, and like I guess some guys in the dorm had watched this movie. I think it was like "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And there's this like KKK scene in the
oh yeah.
movie, and they thought it'd be really funny to like shake my bed at 3 a.m. in the morning wearing
Jesus,
like a
dude.
bunch of white sheets. And I just remember waking up and thinking like, I was just confused and like this is weird, like that people think this is okay. And when you are a minority, you're constantly like gaslit because you don't know like if you're overreacting or if something is actually wrong. And I didn't have like a major black community where I could like kind of, you know, decompress and like, work through some of this trauma with. So a lot of
Yeah,
times I didn't know like, am I like hypersensitive or is this just really fucked up?
yeah.
Uh,
Oh my
so
god.
yeah,
This is like I'm gonna do a little. It's a little confession ish, I guess, and it's gonna feel a little weird to say, but dude, when you're young, I had no black friends as a kid. I was like Whitey McWhitebread in a white bread town, and it was like we had one black guy at our church, and go figure, he did the great singing. Like everyone, he was very. It was very token, and looking back on it, I can see that now. And before I don't know, it's almost like you're excited that there's a black person in your church because it makes you feel like you're a good place for them too. And again, intentionally using like that othering language. But I'm like, there when you're like people like me, and when you're young and you go to Liberty and you're around, like that's like, oh, this is like my first time really being around black people and thinking like you almost feel like the more you can overtly address it or make jokes like that, the less racist you are. And it's not until like you grow a little bit that you realize that's a really idiotic way to look at things. Like
yeah, no,
it's like,
Remember, like Sam, I'm sure you probably remember this, but like groups of kids would be like, "Oh, we're going to a black church this weekend." And they
yeah,
would make like a huge deal out of it, like it was some sort of a field trip or something like that. And I thought, I mean, even at the time, I was like, that just seems weird. Like, what are you doing?
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that like reminds me of. I'm sure you guys remember this, but we had our like campus service requirements where we
yeah,
basically had to like, do community service. I think it was like 20 hours a semester, and one of the community service like activity that I did was going to this like very like lower income community where we would like play with the kids and spend time
Oh,
with
I
them.
think I did that one too.
Yeah. And I loved it because I like went there and thought like, oh, these kids remind me of me. Like this is the kind of community I grew up in, and I'm just
Yep.
so happy to like kind of be around them. And I mean, it was just not like it was not always a great experience for everyone because people do feel really uncomfortable looking at like the like outcome of poverty and classism and racism in this country, and they don't really always know how to like process that well. And but basically after we would have these events, people would always get to like take a kid with them back to campus and bring them to the rot, let them eat. And I always like was so bothered like by the like white saviorism of it all because it never felt super genuine. It was like, you know, this is really like giving me like white savior vibes. And I would always, there was like a couple of white kids in this like neighborhood. No one would ever take the white kids back to campus, like ever. And like, and to me, it just kind of felt like, wow, you just really like the feeling. Like you would never want someone to think that you were hanging out with your little brother. Like, you know, you want people to know like you are like, you know, saving this like black child and like bringing them into like all of the like, you know, splendor of whiteness, and that you have saved them by giving them like proximity to like your privilege. And, you know, but there's no real like commitment to this child. There's no real commitment to this community. And like once like your 20 hours is up, like you hope to never see this child again.
I know. And that's so weird for the kids who like connect with people. And then, it's like when white people go on short-term mission trips, and for the next 6 months, all their profile pictures are them with like a little black kid.
It's so bothersome. And it's like, I love that you have a passion for this community. Like this community needs help and needs support. But like, it would be so like cool to see someone go like, and only take pictures of like the people who actually live in this community and actually like are the ones that you're supporting their work, you know, and the people who are going to be there when you leave. Like, it'd be so awesome if like the spotlight like was on them. And like, you know, I really like honestly have, you know, and this is like becoming somewhat of a tangent, but like, you know, the way that missions is so glorified at Liberty, like I found so troublesome because it's like, man, these kids will raise $5,000 to go to Africa for 2 weeks. Yeah. And it's like, dang, like, do you realize how far that money could go if you just stayed here, you know?
And we had an episode cooking on this exact subject. We were just talking about this last night, but everything you just said is like, it's so true of that community, you know, and I took part in it. You know, I mean, it didn't occur to me at the time, like how silly and ridiculous it was.
You're just looking for, like, I mean, and to some degree, when you're at that point in your life, you're looking for, I guess you're looking for an adventure, and it's easier to have other people pay for it and do it under the name of Christ, and knowing that people will just throw money at you to go there.
Well, and I think like what's missing there is some you know, thoughtful guidance from the leadership around you. You know, like the people who are leading that group should look at a 14-year-old and say, hey, this is not a good way to spend $5,000. Like, if you want to help, go get a job and work and send the proceeds there to make use of, you know, to, like, don't spend $5,000 on a photo op so that you can get out of town for a few weeks this summer.
No, absolutely. And it is this kind of like, I think, colonizing mentality that is so problematic at Liberty, but also like really in the white church, is that like we have something that like is so good and so much better. And like, it's our responsibility to like, you know, basically, you know, proselytize the world, and especially like all of the others. And, you know, it's a really like interesting theology, especially when we think about like how like we look at foreigners, you know, in our country, and at how we despise them and how we feel like they're not like worthy to like be amongst us. But like, we will literally like pay someone to like, while voting for someone who says like, we got to get rid of all the immigrants and we got to like build a giant wall to make sure none of them can get over here, we're going to like at the same time that we're voting for this person, we're going to pay someone to like sneak into a country under the guise of like, oh, we're just tourists, and we're going to like pay them to break the law in this other country and like spread the gospel. And while like if any like one from that country illegally tries to come here and get access to the gospel, like we would shut our doors to them, and we would do everything that we could to deport them. It's just that colonizing like mentality that is so like pervasive at Liberty, but also just really like problematic, and like, confronting that and being like observing that like always like never felt good to me, but definitely like as I've like grown, it's like only felt like a lot more problematic.
Yeah, it feels like, and I definitely want to go down this road, and if we kind of just go off on this, that's fine. But if not, I want to get back to it. But it feels like, growing up very evangelical, that word didn't have the negative connotation that it does now. And I mean, even if whatever the connotation is now, 15 years ago, probably 10 years ago, I still would have considered myself one, even with this, and thought I can change it from the inside. Before, I was disillusioned and didn't believe hardly any of it anymore, really. But I think what's interesting is I'll always refer to it as evangelicalism as a whole, and I'm trying to do better at even just referring to it, talking about it as really what it is, which is white evangelicalism, because it's just like, obviously the Black evangelical community is doing things a lot differently when it comes to the way they vote or the things that they're focusing on. But even if they're like you mentioned, being like coming from a theologically conservative background, even though you were charismatic, but conservative in that, like, I'm thinking about like the LGBTQ issues where it's like, that like biblically speaking, they're not really budget on that. And that's the background that I have too. So like, I can see that, and you can see a lot of theological overlap, but then when it comes to the way you conduct yourself in the world, and the type of world you're building, you can see where white evangelicalism really has those racial blind spots. And I'm like, of course, like over the past 5 years, like since Trump started, I mean, it really started the first time he ran, but over the past 5 years, it's just been like, it's been under a microscope, and trying to break that down, like you have those conversations with like friends, families, like mostly family at this point, but it's just like, it's weird to think of, and then even seeing what Liberty's been doing, like the way that Jerry Jr. had been responding to everything going on, and the way that he's been doubling down on some really horrible things. You're just, not that he's there anymore anyway, but his legacy will leave a lasting impression for sure. But I just keep thinking about the way, like, even referring to evangelicalism, like it feels, that's starting to feel bad to me in the way that, like, that is simply because I operate on the assumption that the white evangelicalism was evangelicalism for so long. It's trying to like kind of shake myself and understand like the kind of the nuance that's going on there. There's been obviously a lot happening over the past 5 years, and it's like, I think there are people who are coming along and really starting to do some of the work. And even Jill and I, my wife Jill, have been having conversations about, like, we're watching these white conservative churches kind of reevaluate their concerns here, when it's like, and those are the ones that I want to like be able to like show people who don't seem to be able to budge, where it's like, look, people who think like you on just about everything are able to come to terms with the fact that there's a lot of problems, racially speaking, within white evangelicalism. And it's kind of funny when you see like these like uptighty looking conservative churches like kind of really doing like some of the work to point that out, and then you see others who just really they're almost getting like, they just, I don't know if it's just like the combative persecution complex, but it feels like some of them are just getting worse.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, doubling down.
Anyway, I want to know what kind of brought you out of, I'm glad we spent time on that, and what kind of how things were for you at Liberty, and got a bit more specific there. But I do want to hear about where you, like, so after that, did you go right into law school after after Liberty? Was that kind of like, did you have that desire when you were at Liberty to pursue that as your next goal?
So I did. I took my LSAT, I think back in like 2011, which is like the law school admissions test. And
Mm-hmm.
I got into some law schools. I really couldn't figure out how the heck I would afford it because, you know, you're not allowed to work your first year of law school.
Oh yeah.
And your last 2 years, you just really shouldn't be working because you should be like interning and like building a resume so that you'll have a job when you graduate. So, I just could not figure out how the heck, like, you know, I would afford to like go to one of the most expensive kinds of schools and, you know, and not work at the same time. So I decided to get my master's as well, instead. And I worked in business for a bit, but, it was around like, I think 2016, which is the like not the last, but, Trump's presidential, election,
Yep.
which I think came to a shock to everyone, even those who voted for him. And I started to feel like I wanted to make more of a difference in my community. So I had previously been working in like business consulting. I worked at a very prominent, IT firm, and moved on to work for another prominent IT firm here in California. And I decided that while I was working at these firms that I would like be very active in my community. So I got really connected with the activist community. I started doing some lobbying work with some policy-based organizations, and I got really involved. And it got to the point during the time of that election that I felt like I want what is kind of like a hobby for me to be more of a vocation.
Yeah.
And so I took the LSAT again because my last one had just expired. And I got the same exact score, which is kind of interesting. And I, decided to, apply to several colleges or law schools. And I decided to go to one right here in Sacramento. I got a full ride there, which was really exciting.
Wow. Good for you, man.
Yeah. Super stoked. And I'm finishing up my last semester, which starts tomorrow actually. And so right now I'm going to be going into criminal defense. I work for or I'm interning for a federal public defender, so I get to represent clients who are charged with federal crimes. And a lot of these people are facing like very punitive outcomes, a few years in prison, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And you see a lot of the disparity in how like people are treated based on their race and class. And, I have clients who I'm like, you're being charged with this crime that I know this other person was charged with. But they're asking for jail time and like this huge fine for you. Whereas like the white guy who had the same criminal history as you just got his charges dismissed really easily. And there's this kind of disparity that you see in how the criminal justice system treats people of color. And so I'm super stoked to be a part of this community. And my plan is to be in New York City in the summer, where I will be taking the bar and working as a public defender there. But I may take another offer. I have a couple of decisions I'm kind of mulling over right now. But super stoked to be where I'm at right now.
That's really awesome, man. Good for you. That's
that sounds
great. I imagine that it must be because I'm obviously you knew the statistics going into this probably pretty well about the way that the way that people of color are disproportionately sentenced. Has it been hard to be a firsthand witness to it when you're really the one, and then having the responsibility on your shoulders of trying to do something about it? What's that been like for you?
Absolutely. It's incredibly re-traumatizing. You like so off, and it's incredibly gaslighting as well, because you have people on the other side who are constantly telling you like, oh, well, we look at every case the same way. Like, we didn't know this. We don't know the race. We just get the paper and we make the charges. And it's just like, no, like, first of all, before this case even gets to the, prosecutor's office, you're dealing with the fact that like minority communities are disproportionately like patrolled. If
Right.
like you live in a country where marijuana, for instance, you're not more or less likely to smoke weed based on how much money you make, based on your academic experience, based on your race, your class. It is one of the most like transcendent, like recreational drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone does it equally, but you're 80% more likely to get arrested and charged with a drug crime if you're black, and that's because you don't have like cop cars like patrolling through like Middletown suburbia, like you have them like going through like the inner city communities. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take an interest in making sure that we don't like make it our goal to treat people the same way. We don't see that in the criminal justice system, unfortunately, and it does kind of like remind me of a lot of like the triggering experiences I had at Liberty, for instance, because it's like, well, like if you do the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about, or like why is it that people are like, even there shouldn't be any concern about injustice, because if you just follow the law, you won't have any issues. But then like I get my clients and it's like, okay, so the kids who bring weed and cocaine to school in the rich neighborhoods, when they get caught, their parents get called, they get suspended, no big deal. The kids at the rich school, inner city school, they're fighting in the hallway, and the PE teacher breaks it up. Maybe someone gets suspended, maybe they don't, and it's over. And the inner city school, you get caught fighting in the hallway, there's a resource officer who's right there, who's going to arrest you, who's going to take you to juvenile hall. You have a criminal record as a child, and the impact it has on your ability to succeed, and the effect it has on like your trajectory is like highly detrimental. And it's traumatizing to kind of relive these experiences through my clients, but it's also like a huge honor because I know that I have the ability to advocate for them in a way that maybe other people don't. I have the ability to normalize the experience of being a black man in front of the courts, in front of the prosecutor, and the legal community is only 4% black. It's only 2% black men. And I've heard a lot of if you talk to a black attorney, you'll hear a lot of stories about how when they show up to court, they get yelled at by the judge, like, "Where's your attorney?" No, I'm the attorney. Like, what are you doing here? Are you the court reporter? Are you no? Like, I'm the attorney. And so those are the kind of experiences that help us normalize the experience of being black in front of juries and a court system. And I think that in a lot of ways, I did that for my friends at Liberty, like normalize that experience that seemed to be a lot like obscure, and helping them understand like some of their own like biases and prejudices. And so just doing that in the criminal justice system, and I'm pretty excited about it.
That's really cool, man. I love hearing that. I think that sounds like you're going to be able to do some really great stuff. If you end up in New York, I'm only about 2.5 hours away from there. I'll have to.
Dude, we'll definitely connect.
Meet up with you.
Yes, 100%.
Do you think that? So, I mean, you got a ground level perspective on a lot of those things. Is this like is part of this problem just an old guard of people in charge that are just not going to change? We're basically waiting for them to die off, or do you see those attitudes and things like that perpetuating themselves in the newer generation of people that are coming into that industry?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to ask. I used to subscribe to that latter thinking that we were just kind of waiting for the old guard to die off, until like these recent years where you see this like very like this resurgence of like overt like racism and hostility and prejudice in a very like young generation. You see like this like pockets of like the Proud Boys. You got the neo-Nazis like rallying in Charlottesville. You got these people who are so like connected to hatred and like very young. And my hope is that like it's not a microcosm of like who we are as a society. But a huge part of me kind of looks at it like this: for us to live in a society that is equitable, where everyone has equal access to opportunity, where everyone is treated the same, a lot of people who benefit from not being an other have to willingly, purposefully, knowingly, intelligently relinquish their privilege. And not a lot of people want to relinquish their privilege. You know, a prosecutor might feel really good about letting the white guy, you know, dismiss their charges, let them go off scot-free after like prosecuting a few black kids. It's like, okay, I did my good in the world. I helped someone. I gave someone a second chance who deserves it. And they deserve it because like they look like me, or like I can relate to them, or I like look at them and I can feel like a little bit more connected to their background. And, you know, obviously we had a very interesting summer. We saw a lot of black squares on Instagram. We have a lot of people showing up to marches. And I think it's easier. That movement was like easier to kind of spread because everyone's bored and nothing to do at home right now. But, you know, part of me does think that it's a long like road ahead because, you know, people do, you know, Harvard put out a study a few years ago that said that if you are like a white man and you have a felony on your record, you have a 17% chance of getting a job you're qualified for. If you're a black man with no criminal history at all, you have a 7% chance of getting a job you're qualified for.
Oh my God.
You know, to get to a place that's equitable, where everyone is treated the same, where everyone has equal opportunity to succeed, a lot of people have to acknowledge the benefits that they experience and reject them. And I don't know that, you know, we're really that altruistic of a society. So I do feel like it's a long road ahead.
It sounds like just hearing you say all that, it really, you know, there are my more optimistic moments. It feels like when they look around and I see millennials who are talking about white privilege and things like that and thinking that because they've acknowledged it, they've eliminated it, is like we're that we're really far off from. I don't know. Yeah, it feels just hearing what you're saying and realizing that like every single person making these decisions, whether it's hiring managers, whatever, they're going to be millennials soon, and they probably already are. And it sounds like these studies probably aren't going to be changing as much as we would have hoped or would think, with the amount of conversation that's happening about white privilege and what it means to check it, because apparently that's not working out as well, and it's not quite enough.
Yeah, something that I think kind of like really resonates with what I described is that, you know, you had some prominent, like, you know, Hollywood actors and actresses, and Hollywood is like seen as being like the progressive cesspool of America.
Yeah.
You know, and you got all these like Hollywood actors and actresses, black squares and Black Lives Matter and all of these things. And, you know, these are the same people who are simultaneously, you know, paying like people to take their kids' SATs and like getting them into like Ivy League schools that they don't deserve to get into. So it's like, are people really letting go of their privilege? I know. I don't know. I hope so. I think that that's the case for some people. I hope that it happens, you know, with more. And I guess, you know, only time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, the number of issues that require things to make change, whether it's just like school, I mean, even starting with school districts and things like that. Like, it just is, it sometimes it feels like saying this sounds ridiculous. But sometimes it feels like the amount of like bricks that have to like get, I don't know, I lost my metaphor, but the amount of things that need to get realigned to start moving in the right direction, like the amount of nuance that there is to this subject, which is like, you know, when I talk to certain maybe people in my family about why their pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality isn't really an accurate model by which you should view the world. And then you have those conversations and you try to break it down over the past like 70, 100 years, 200 years, whatever. Like even going back to like redlining not being made illegal till like the 70s or something. Like, and you deal with stuff like that, and like, it's like by the time you're done talking, and they're just like, "What did you just even say to me?" Like the amount that has been like the amount of our country that's been built on like racial disparities is like, and then looking at the way that it seems like white people are understanding them. Not that I'm an expert at all by any means, and I still have obviously a lot to learn, and I don't know. I don't really know what to say there, but it just feels like so much needs to be realigned from a systemic level, and that obviously seeps into our political landscape and the types of people we elect. And I know when you look at politically speaking, like, and how to fix those things. I
think that one of the things that's tough about that, like, and you leave the people out of it that are just unwilling to look at some of this stuff, like the kind of changes and decisions that ultimately matter and make a difference in the trajectory of the society, are not like these loud performative changes, because those typically aren't costing people much of anything, right? Like posting a black square or, making a snide comment to someone on Facebook that said something that, it's racist or borderline racist, whatever. Like those things don't really do much to change the trajectory of where we're going. Like the things that change those are like you said, like, am I going to use some unfair advantage that I have because of my status or something like that to get my kids into a school that they probably don't deserve to go to? Nobody's going to pat you on the back for like having your kids take their own SATs. And it's not something you're going to advertise, but like that's a much more important choice than posting a black square. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's easy to point at everybody else and talk about why their actions don't matter, especially when it's Hollywood, because they're just easy targets for that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that's what's tough. Like everybody's ultimately looking out for number one. And there's a lot of systemic things that benefit number one if you're a white person in this country. And you're right, like asking people to pay attention to those things and to give them up, especially when there's no like societal glorification that comes with it, is tough. It's hard to make that case for people.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge point. There's no incentive, except for knowing that you're doing the right thing. Why would any, there's an instance where, there was a case where there were, multiple guys who were in possession of drugs, and, all of them are charged with a drug crime. And, the cases against all of the guys get dropped except for one who ended up being black. The kids who had gotten their charges dismissed were white, and the one kid who the case continued against was black. And what incentive like would there be for the white kids to say, no, we want our records to be just as muddied as this guy's?
Yeah, I know.
It's so it's a hard place to be, because I imagine that in those white kids' minds, they probably think like, we really love our friend. We care about him. He's in our community. We play basketball with him. We hang out with him. He spends the night at our house. We love this guy. We don't have any issue with the fact that he's black. We love everyone. But when faced with the opportunity to rectify, to correct the disadvantage that only affects him, like, would they really, take the opportunity? And as a society, I think that it's unfortunate that people are too like married to the idea of like benefiting. And that is why like classism is so much fun. It isn't that like we like to see people starving. At least I hope, maybe Scrooge is out there. But we really like the feeling of knowing we got more than someone else. We really like the feeling of knowing like we have access to something more. We have the nicer house, the nicer car, something is better. And the idea of like normalizing the experience of humanity so that everyone has like what they need to survive. I don't really think there's a lot of incentive, and it makes me sad, but there is going to take some cataclysmic event that forces us to, be better. And maybe that means that, all of us will just have to keep procreating and like eventually everyone will look the same.
I'm out.
But even then I wonder like what's going to be the new thing like that, we use to like separate in other people, because at the end of the day, people like being privileged in some way.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a really, God, we could really go down that rabbit hole. We don't have to, but it is interesting because you do look at anywhere and actually it's ironic as some people will point to this as a defense against why, like almost as like a way to, lessen the blow of racism in our country. They're like, look, if you look anywhere, like people have always found a way to subjugate others. And you're like, that's not really a good reason to subjugate. I don't know if you're looking for like an award because we're not doing anything worse than other people throughout history. But it is interesting though that you make the point, because that is concerning. Like that there is always a way to other people. And it seems like if you look at the world's makeup. Yeah, you look at the world's track record, it's like, what does it look like to eliminate that in a society? Like when we're like right now, we're dealing with a lot of issues related to race and ethnicity, but what is it when you say what are we going to move on to after that? That's really oh God, it makes me feel sad. I guess that you said to think of it in those terms, because it does sometimes feel like, oh, let's just solve this issue and we'll be good. But it is like, I mean, can you even solve this issue? I mean, as a whole, like, what's that mean? I don't know. It's like,
there's like an open, I don't know if there is or not, but like, is anybody, I mean, is there any countries that are known for doing this well?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Who's doing a good job with this right now? Somebody has to be.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had the privilege of traveling around Europe for a couple of months, and I definitely felt like the experience of being a Black person, I felt was honestly better in like most of the places I went to, as opposed to America. I think that the way, or like the way that I kind of assess like the like inclusivity of a community is, when does it get to the point where like I like kind of forget that I am like that one of my identities is a Black person, which isn't like a goal of mine. Like I like being Black. I like my history and my culture, and I think it's important, and I don't want it to be erased. I don't like the whole like colorblind philosophy. But when I'm not constantly on guard and like concerned about like how this identity is going to like affect other people, and there aren't a lot of places that I can say that I felt that, and I think that it's definitely a struggle that the world has yet to kind of resolve. Yeah,
that gives me a good bit to think about. I don't have much to say to that. It's fine. I like, because you think of, like, if I was, and this would, I don't know if this is a bad comparison. So let me know if I'm making a really bad comparison here. But when you said that, it made me think, when I'm the only white person in a room or the area, it's something I notice. And I don't know if that's good, bad. I don't really know how I would break it down.
The same implications, but
I can't imagine what it would be like to not notice that. And that's because I live in a very white world. So for you to say that is it's interesting for me to think about. I don't know if I should have said
I think that's a kind of a great thing to kind of think about, because that is an experience that a lot of people of color, a lot of Black people, live with. And I live in California. It is arguably like one of the most, if not the most, like progressive like states in the country. We are actually a majority minority state, meaning that like there are more minorities in this state than anywhere
Huh.
than there are white people, and huge Latinx population. Actually, only 6% Black. So it's also interesting because you find more Black people in the states where like there's more discrimination, which kind of like takes away from the idea that the more you have, the less that there will be.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's quite often where I'm like, dang, I'm like, I will get really, really excited when I'm not the only like Black person in a restaurant or a
Yeah.
room. Or, I am like one of two Black guys graduating from my law school this year, and yeah, it's a really like interesting experience to kind of go through life that way. I definitely felt like didn't feel that way a lot at Liberty at first, but the more that you kind of interact with prejudice and bias and racism, it starts to really like stand out to you. And I think it stands out more than anything because like you're concerned for your safety, and you don't want to be anywhere where like your safety can come into you know question. And that is
Yeah.
I think a whole other like long tangent. It's really easy to like find good things to talk about with you guys.
Yeah, man. This has been really awesome. There was this. I listened to this rapper, Open Mike Eagle, and there's this line that he had from a long. I don't know. I think I probably heard it like 7 years ago, and I'm gonna say I feel like I want to share it only because it's been like something that has stuck with me ever since, and I have a feeling that after going to Liberty and being people's like Black friend, that you probably understand like and have thought this is just something that you wouldn't even had to have thought about. It's just naturally something you understand. But he says, fuck you if you're a white man that assumes I speak for Black folks. Fuck you if you're a white man who thinks I can't speak for Black folks. Mm-hmm. And I even in having this conversation, like I think about that line because I'm like just being forced into the representation for the Black community, but also like if being able to have like, I don't know, if your voice is maybe different on some things, or maybe feeling like people could use the things you say as like, I don't know, their own personal mouthpiece for the end all be all. Like, and I think of where we're at with, and I don't know, hope if this just keeps us going a little bit longer, that's okay. Because I think this is an interesting conversation and I really want to hear what you have to say about it. And I think of where we're at with like the way news media works right now and the way like you have I think it's like your Candace Owens, or like you might have like I don't know, like someone I was watching Newsmax recently, and like they might have like a Black person with doing something on that, and like you think of like there's this what's the word? It's like elevate, or I don't know, like elevate Black voices, whatever. And it seems like everybody kind of has the Black voice that they want to promote, and they can find the Black voice that supports their narrative. And it's like, I'm just really having a hard time thinking like about how to engage with people in that, because you might have been that Black voice that somebody wanted. Oh, my Black friend told me this way, so therefore this is the way it is. And it's like people. It seems like a continuation, maybe even on the left. And the right of like Black voices being used as white props versus like, so it's like even knowing that line of like when to use Black voices that have something to say and when to understand that you're just trying to, I don't know, use Black people to say the things you want to say again. And that,
I think, well, and that's like, those are all really good like things to ponder and consider. And I think that, I mean, that's really like to give a very complex question a very simple answer. I would say that that you are giving a platform, that is coming from a genuine place to a Black person when it isn't like serve your own interests. I mean, Candace Owens type figures really exist for bias confirmation. The second she has, and like, this is the interesting thing about Candace Owens. Candace Owens used to be very liberal. She was highly Democrat, highly like progressive, very liberal. She actually like brought a lawsuit, a discrimination lawsuit. I believe it was against an academic institution with the NAACP because she felt like she was being discriminated against. And, you know, she eventually decided that she was going to like switch sides. And, you know, for some people, it is, you know, it's just like really beneficial to do whatever it takes to get ahead. And I always joke about this like all the time that like, dang, if I just like put on a MAGA hat and say like, you know, I support Trump really loud in a video and post it to Twitter, I'll probably get like 50,000 like followers immediately because like so many people are looking for that bias confirmation. It's like, you know, it's really hard not to find, you know, it's really hard to find a Black person who thinks and supports like racist and white supremacist ideals, who doesn't have a huge following and isn't really liked by a lot of white people. Because like they really exist to confirm the biases of like other people. Yeah. And you know, I think it's a really difficult place for any white person to be in to try to like have like and navigate the ideas and opinions and like experiences of Black people because, you know, Black people are not a monolith. Like we are a very nuanced community. You will talk to one Black person and they will tell you, don't call me Black, I am African American. And you will talk to another Black person who will tell you, I am not from Africa, I am Black. Like, don't you dare. You will talk to Black people who think very differently about different things. And it can be really difficult because you are left like trying to juggle like, you know, how to really like represent or communicate or understand Black people. And that is really, really hard. But I don't have a lot of sympathy or compassion or feel bad for white people struggling with that because, and this is what I try to explain, like, or how I try to explain like white privilege to a lot of my like friends is that, you know, as a Black person, every single day since as long as I can remember, I have to several times a day think about how to assimilate into white culture. Whatever that is. Like I have to think about like how to make a white person comfortable, how to be likable to a white person, whether I'm applying for a job, whether I'm writing a paper that's going to be like graded by a white person. I'm constantly like evaluating how I can like code switch is what we call it in the Black community and become more palatable or discernible to white people. But the privilege of being white is that if you want to, you could go through your life without ever having to do that. You know, without ever having to become palatable to an other, without ever having to like be approachable or think about how to be more discernible or likable to like an other. And it would never affect your ability to succeed. And like that is like really like the experience of privilege, to be able to walk through life without really ever having to consider or assimilate or connect, you know, with something other than like what you've always known. Yeah,
man. I feel like that's a good place to end it. I really appreciate, like, I don't know, I don't want to, I don't want to drag this out forever. And I really appreciate you like talking to us about these kinds of things and just kind of reminiscing some college stuff with us. It's been really a pleasure to have you talking with us, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's great to meet you.
Dude, awesome meeting you, Casey. It's great hearing from you again, Sam. Thanks for letting me ramble. Sorry for rambling.
No, yeah, we welcome the rambling. It takes some of the pressure off. So I don't know if, Casey, do you want to, I don't know if you have anything before we sign off. I kind of just made the decision that we're jumping off here, but if you can you want to close this out.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.